This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Lamid Gimel. All the learning should bring an incredible schoshiruch to Yisrael Chaim ben Devayra Tamasipa Bas Perel Rachel Shalom Lebizavo V'Gentelishem and Chayeb Lumo Yudas Bas Sima Malka, as well as Chusfu Shalem Shmal Yisrael and Vedish Mel Tila Dam Salas Ben Chlas and Acham Bas Yubas Arbeluma Bas Mendel Chaim Moshe Ben Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Milka Bas Shav Figa Bashir Chana B'Seich Ashar Chayle Yisrael. Yesterday we ended with an incredible machlekes with regarding to Isser Chalal Isser. We started with a machlekes Rav Yesi Rav Chia, which morphed into a machlekes between Amoirayim of Rav Chia and Bar Kapara as to the pshita of Rav Yesi. That's one detail I want to correct, is that they're arguing whether Rav Yesi holds Isser Kailel. The Gemara originally said yesterday that Rav Yesi holds Ein Isser Chalal Isser, but he's a Maida by Isser Maisif. The Gemara had Kasha, and the Gemara proved that that's not true. So now says the Gemara yesterday, and this is we're about to chazir the entire basically Amud Beis, that plukta, there's a machlokes Amoraim whether Rav Yesi holds by Isser Koilel, when there's an Isser that's more extensive, whether it includes, whether it will say Yesh Isser Chalal Isser. And the machlokes is Rav Chia and Bar Kapara. Rav Chia says you're chayiv twice, or Bar Kapara says you're chayiv once. And there's three cases in which we spoke about yesterday, in which we're going to pick it up from today. Case number one is Zar Sheshimish B'Shabbos. We have two Yisurim. Number one is you're doing Malacha on Shabbos. Number two, what are you doing? You are a non-Kayin. So number one, as it says over here on the right side, you have an Isser Zaris. You're not do avoid if you're not a kohen. Number two, on the left side, it says you have an Isser Malacha. This is an Isser Koilel. Why? Because the person not only is Asr because they're not Kohen, it's Shabbos, so there's more Isurim. There's more things Asr, so there's an Isser Koilel, more things are adding on. Says Rav Chia that Isser Koilel thereby says, you're Chayiv Shtayim. Bar Kapara says, no, you're still only Chayiv one. Says the Gemara case number two, a Balmum Sheshimish Bitoma. Again, normally we have a Balmum, normally we have a Kohen, a Kohen Balmum, what's the halacha? He's allowed to eat karbanos. He's just not allowed to do the avodah. When he becomes tamei, there's more yisurim that come upon him. Now he's not allowed to eat anything as well. So it says the Gemara that's an Isser Kailel. There's more yisurim. Rav Chia says you're chayiv twice. Bar Kapar says you're chayiv once. And finally, case number three is zar sha'achal melika. We have a zar, a non-kohen that eats from the carbon oif that was shechted in the way that a carbon oif is supposed to be shechted by a kohen with his thumb. So number one, a zar generally is not allowed to eat. A zar is not allowed to eat karbanis, and a zar is not allowed to eat nevela. So says the Gemara, this is a case. This is actually pointing out the next part of the Gemara, but let's just leave it for a moment. This says the Gemara, this is again a case of a Isser Kailel. And then Rav Chia is going to say Yechayiv twice, and Karkar is going to say Yechayiv once. We're going to see, and really it points out already over here, we'll see this in a moment, that this is Bivas Achas, but Isser Koilel. It's not really an Isser Koilel, it's a little bit of a different case, as the Gemara will elaborate on. And therefore, the Gemara is going to have to say that that's the machlokes between Rav Chia and Rav Yesi, and let's get to it right now. Says the Gemara, on the top of Lamed Gimel and Aleph, basically what we just explained, B'mai Kamifchi, what is this machlokes between Rav Chia and Bar Kapara? So we think the machlokes is Isser Koilel Vali B'Rav Yesi, like we just explained. That whenever we have an Isser Koilel, we have something that's more. There are more things included. According to Rav Yesi, Rav Chia Savar Rav Yesi B'Isser Koilel Machayiv Tarti. Bar Kapara Savar Lo Machayiv Alachada. Says the Gemara, my Isser Koilel Ika. Now we're going to go through all three cases in which we just showed via the pictures, so it'll be a little bit simpler. My Isser Koilel Ika, says the Gemara, what Isser Koilel is there? And of course, we already know what's about to happen. In the first two cases, we're going to have no problem. The third case, as we just saw, we're going to run into an issue. Says the Gemara, Bishlam Azar, I understand the case of a non-Koyin, Mei Kara Shari Melacha. A non-Koyin is allowed to do some level of Melacha. Incorrect. A non-kohen is allowed to do malacha, not on Shabbos. But v'aser ba'avaida, and he's not allowed to work in the base of Mikdash. Asya Shabbos comes along. Mi yudka misar b'malacha, misar not ba'avaida. Because Shabbos says there's more things forbidden, malacha's aser. It's also going to say that avoida is forbidden as well. So to be two Yisurim, according to Rav Chia. Baal Mum as well, make our shari be'achila v'aser ba'avoida. A Baal Mum originally is lari karbanis. He's a kain. He does not let to do the avoida. Itmale, when he becomes tame, what happens now? It's an iser kailel. What happens? Migu dekam misar ba'achila. Now he can't eat karbanis anymore. Misar nami ba'avoida. There'll be an additional iser if you were to do the avodah as well. But ask the Gemara, Malika b'vas achas the mishkachas law, beser koilel lo mishkachas law. Says the Gemara, when it comes to Malika, when it comes to the third case of this non-koyin that's eating from this karban ov, it's only in a case where the nevela and the non-kayin come at the simultaneous moment, because nevela is aser to always, and if it's not a shchit, it's automatically a nevela, and he's a non-kayin. But iser koilo mishkachsa, it's not an additional, more extensive, more inclusive iser that's being added on. So says the Gemara, how could we explain that the machlekes of iser koilel goes on this case? Ella, so Gemara says you're right. So again, attempt number one was to explain that the machlekes between Rav Chia and Bar Kapara within Rav Chia Bar Kapara within the das of Rav Yosi was Isser Koilel. Says the Gemara, no. You know what the machlekes of Rav Chia and Bar Kapara is? They're arguing with regard to when we have a bas achas, when we have a simultaneous Isser that happens. What is the story? Rav Chia Sava Rav Yosi Beiser bas achas b'chayiv tarti. Bar Kapara Sava lo mechayiv elachada. Ask the Gemara, okay, great, so that's the machlekes. Again, we're going to go through the same steps. What is the Isser b'vas achas over here? That we can understand that what? Going to Isi Shtei Sairos b'Shabbos, that on Shabbos, this Zar become of age. And therefore, the Havelu Zarois Vishabis Bahadi Adadi. So there's two things that happen at the moment. When he becomes a Gadol, that's when he becomes Asr, that's when he has the status of a Zar and Ankoyin, they can't do the Avaida, and it's Shabbos. So they both collide simultaneously. So I understand that that's going to be the Machlekes over there. Rav Chia saying Chayiv 2, Bar Kapar saying Chayiv 1. Balmon Nami, case number 2, Kigoin Daisi Shtei Cyrus Vitmalei. The same moment that he brought Shtei Cyrus, the same moment that he becoming a Gadol, is the moment in which his Tumah takes effect, and therefore they both happen simultaneously. Inami, another way of saying this case, we have a Kayin in which he cut his finger with a knife to Meya, that was Tameh, and therefore he becomes a Baal Mum and he becomes Tameh simultaneously, because the act that made him a Baal Mum is that which makes him Tameh. So says the Gemara, the first two cases we can explain that it's an Isser b'vas achas. But pauses the Gemara, and the Gemara says 1 second. According to Rav Chia, I understand when Rebbe said, and now we're going back to what we pointed out in the Mishnah, in that both Rebbe and Bar Kapara, no, not Rebbe and Bar Kapara, incorrect, Rav Chia and Bar Kapara. Now we're pointing out in both that Rebbe and Rav Yosi in the Mishnah use the lashon that they're making a shvua. So let's let the Gemara develop itself. Kiyas now lididei ali b'derav Yosi. When Rabbi said that Rav Chia said you're chayiv twice, he was going within Rav Yosi. But according to Rav Shimon, who says that it cannot, there's only one Isser, according to, no, we're having name issues. Apologies. El Bar Kapara. But according to Bar Kapara, Rav Chia Shekuri Mishaker. But according to Bar Kapara, who says that according to Rav Yosi, how many Isurim are there? Only one. Why? Because an Isur b'vas achas does not apply. So Bar Kapara is arguing on Rav Chia, and Bar Kapara is learning there's only one Isur. So Rav Chia Shekuri Mishaker. What happened? Rav Chia quoted Rabbi. He Amad. He kafat v'nishba. He got up and he made a shvua. And what did he say? He said you're chayiv 2 times. But how can we find such a case according to Bar Kapara? Ella kom niflagi be'isser bas achas v'aliba de Rav Shimon. So the Gemara now is taking a completely new course and says the Gemara that you know what the machlek is. We're trying to figure out. We know Rav Chia and Bar Kapara had a machlek, so we don't know what they argued about. So attempt number one we started with today, which was a flowover from yesterday, was they arguing Bisser Koilel within the Shita of Rav Yosi. That didn't work, so we started arguing Bisser Bas Achas within the Shita of Rav Yosi. That didn't work in the wording of the Mishnah. So now we're saying that they're arguing Bisser Bas Achas, but now within the Shita of Rav Yosi. We're switching right now, and rather we're saying that they're arguing within the Shita of Rav Shimon. And now explains the Gemara. Bisham l'Rav Chia kamishtabel afuki l'Rav Shimon mechazkiya. It makes sense that Rav Chia got up and he made his shvua. Why? In order to show what he held, Rav Shimon held. El bar kapara. Lama lilish tabuye. According to Bar Kapara, what is the point of the shvua over here? Explains the Gemara. Kasha, that is, you're right. Indeed, shver. Before we go further, I believe there is a Rashi over here. Yeah. Says Rashi, all the way towards the bottom of the Amid, says the Rashi. Let's look at a few Rashis. Rashi's about 15 lines to the bottom. And Rashi says, Aliba de Rav Shimon. V'achi kama Rav Chia. Af al gav de polig Rav Shimon potar. Even though Rav Shimon argues, and he says, you're potar, hani mili bekoilel. When does Rav Shimon argue in Rav Yosi and say, in Isser Chalal Isser? That is by Isser Koilel. When it's more inclusive, we're adding on Isurim. Av bivas achas, when there's two Isurim happening simultaneously, then Moida, Rav Shimon is Moida. Neither one comes before the other one, so we can't say one is, which if anyone's thinking, the whole sugya is Isser Chalal Isser. And that's the reason why when it happens, Bivas Achas, it makes a lot of sense to say that one will be Moida, because at the same time, it's not Chal on top of each other, they're both happening simultaneously. That's Rav Shimon, Ubar Kapara, and that's Rav Chia L'das Rav Shimon, excuse me. Ubar Kaparam Razachas Nami Polig Rav Shimon. So that's the new way of explaining the machlokes. Rav Chia says Rav Shimon will be Moida Bivasachas, even though normally he says Isser A is not Chal and Isser B, but when it happens simultaneously, then Rav Chia will say Rav Shimon is Moida, and Bar Kapara will say no. So the Gemara explained that makes sense. That makes sense according to Rav Chia that you're going to be chayiv two times. Normally Rav Shimon is mekel and says the two Yisum are not chal. Rav Chia. So Rav Chia got up and said, I make a shvua. What's the lashon of a shvua? Lashon of a shvua is that he's proving his point. So Rav Chia bangs on the standard and yells, I'm making a shvua. The Rav Shimon is moide. That when it's vasachas, what's Rav Shimon moide to? That you're going to be chayiv two times. But says the Gemara, but according to Bar Kapara, what's the shvua? According to Bar Kapara, Rav Shimon is holding his regular shita, so the wording of the Mishnah is very difficult, and the Gemara says, you're right, kasha. But the Gemara continues and says, Bishlam Bar Kapara. Now the other way, Bar Kapara a moment ago was shver. We're back in the Gemara 5 lines to the bottom. According to Bar Kapara, it makes sense, Kiyas Nayu Rebbe Lididei, that when Rebbe says to Bar Kapara that there's only one Isser that's going within the Shita of Rav Shimon, Aliba de Rav Shimon, Kiyasayr Rav Chia, Aliba de Rav Yosi, El Rav Chia. But according to Rav Chia, that's saying now, according to Rav Chia, who's saying that Rav Shimon is agreeing that there's two Isurim, that because it's Bivas Achas, Rav Shimon is Moida, that Yesh Isser Chalal Isser, but of course it's simultaneously two Isurim will apply. Bar Kapara, Shikuri Kamishak. Now the opposite, according to Rav Chia, comes out that Bar Kapara is lying. What does that mean? He says that Rebbe says you only chayiv once. How could that be? So Amr L'cha Rav Chia, to this we have a teretz. Ki esnayo Rebbe lididei. When Rebbe said that Bar Kapara says your chayiv only one was lididei, that was his own opinion. Tarti, when he says you're chayiv two times, is a lifter asnaye, is is telling you that there are two exemptions, two times that you're not chayiv from the second chiyuv. Two of the three cases you're going to be pater from, as we turn over, the Gemara is about to explain, the iser koilel asnaye, and he said that whenever it's an Isser Koilel, whenever one Isser is more inclusive, there's more Yisurim inside, then Asnai, then that is where it's going to apply. Valiba Dirav Shenemin. That's what Rebbe learned. And this is going to be a classical case in which A was taught, another Amayra heard, and he thought he said something else. And remember, there are three cases. We had Shabbos, we had Balmum Tama, and we have Zar Malika. So Rebbe came along and only taught the din by two of the three cases. But comes along Bar Kapara, v'chazi leBar Kapara lezar she'alcha Malika. Now Bar Kapara thought that he was also referring to the case of a Zar she'alcha Malika. V'aydi didam yalah Arva Bahadayu. And because to Bar Kapara, he thought that this case number 3 was equal to the first two cases, therefore he learned all three of them together. But in truth, Rebbe was only speaking about case A of Shabbos and case B of Tumah Balmum. Rebbe was not talking about case 3 of the Zar. But because Bar Kapara thought they were all the same, he put them all together. He lumped them all together in his brain. And then later on in time, Bar Kapara is thinking about it. He says, 1 second. And he said, what exactly is the machlekes in these three cases? Said Bar Kapara, the machlekes is b'vasachas. V'savar, and he thought, midahav vasachas, hanam vasachas. And he thought all three of them are within one boat, and all three of them are one machlekes of Bas Achas. But the problem is, Umedahanach Liftar, Anach Nami Liftar. And excuse me, and that's what he thought. He thought that just like Rebbe said, you're a potter, and you only chayav one time in the first two cases, he thought the same thing in the third case. So the Gemara is now explaining where the mistake came from. The mistake came from the fact that Bar Kapara thought case number 3 of Zar, case number 3 of Zar Sha'achal Malika was included in the first two cases, even though Rebbe never said that. So ask the Gemara, Meisvei, 5 lines down, Zar Shashimish B'Shabbos, Balmum Shashimish B'Tama, Yesh Kam Misham Zarus, Misham Shabbos, Misham Balmum, Misham Tama, Dever Rav Yosi. We have a Brisa, and the Brisa says the first two cases that we're talking about, we have a Zar and Shabbos, we have a Balmum B'Tama. Says the Brisa, we have an Isser of Zarus, an Isser of Shabbos, we have an Isser of Balmum, and Isser of Tama, Tivri Rav Yosi. That's where Rav Yosi says this to Isurim. Rav Shimon Aimer Inkan Al Misham Zarus Ubalmum Belvan. No, it's only one Isser in each case, respectively. Veilu Malika Sharyeh. But says the Gemara, what do we see? The third case, like we just said, the case of Malika was not taught, is not part of this Brisa. The case of Malika is not within the Machlekes Rav Yosi and Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, why not? Laman Sharyeh. Why did this Brisa leave out the case of Malika? If you're going to tell me left it according to Rav Yosi, according to Rav Yosi remembers that even Bisser Koilel, that's what we started today. Rav Yosi says whenever it's more inclusive, Isser, there are 2 Yisurim. Certainly when it happens simultaneously, Rav Yosi is going to hold that there are 2 Yisurim. Elolav Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, you know what must be going on over here? It must be within Rav Shimon. U'Bisser Koilel u'depatar. It's only in the case of an Isser Koilel. That's when Rav Shimon says you're a pater. Avul be'Isser Vasachas mechayiv. But Isser Vasachas you're mechayiv. Tiyofta bar kapara tiyofta. And there it says the Gemara that is indeed a kasha on Bar Kapara. So Gemara proved basically what we said up top, that Bar Kapara himself was one that made this mistake of Malika, as we see clearly in the Brisa that they're arguing only about Isser Koilel V'Srazachas. He would hold that you are Mechayiv. Says the Gemara, let's go into the first case for one more moment before we get to the Mishnah. Zar Sheshimish B'Shabbos B'Mai. What is the case of Zar Sheshimish B'Shabbos? What's the case? Says the Gemara, Ibish Shchita B'Zar Kshera. No, I read it wrong. Ibish Shchita B'Zar Kshera. Says the Gemara, what's the malacha that the Zar is doing, that there's two Isurim, an Isser Zar that he's a non-Kayin, and an Isser Shabbos. If you're going to tell me that he shechted the carbon, a Yisrael is allowed to shecht the carbon, if he's catching the dam and he's walking with it, so what's the problem doing that on Shabbos? Til Ba'almu. He's not doing anything. He's just carrying the blood. You're just carrying the blood. Iba haktara. If there's no Isser Shabbos, just carrying the item. Iba haktara. If he's burning it on the mizbeach. But Rav Yosi taught us that havara is a lav. And it's not kares. And we're looking for an Isser which carries with it kares. Why? Because an Isser kares would be that which would potentially lead to a chatos. So says the Gemara, what is the case in which there are two Isurim which will result in a chatos? Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov Shchitas Paroi Shel Kohen Gadol. Fascinating. We've been learning for the last 2 days of this case is Zar Sheshimesh B'Shabbos. And we said it's simple. It's a non-Kohen that does the Avaida. Now when the Gemara boils it down to find out what is the malacha and the avaita, the two items that he can be chayiv with simultaneously on Shabbos, the one case the Gemara comes up with, if a zar shechs paroi shel kohen gadol, because even though a zar, a non-kohen, is allowed to do regular shchita, but a par of the kohen gadol, the v'yomer shchitas par shel kohen gadol, bizar psula, that's the one carbon, a zar is not allowed to shecht. Ihachi, asked the Gemara, Ma'iri zar afilu kohen adin nami, if what you're saying is correct, the kohen gadol's par has to be shechted by the kohen gadol. So why is the Brisa creating case of a zar sheshachat, even a kohen hadiyat sheshachat is the same din, because a regular kohen is also not allowed to shech this carbon. Shezar etzloig kamar. Says the Gemara, you know why? It means, it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't mean zar sheshachat, zar referring to a non-kohen. It means a zar with relation to the kohen gadol, which includes a zar, a Yisrael, and a kohen hadiyat. Maskiv la Rav Ashi, asked Rav Ashi, midi chatais katani. Did the Brisa say chatais? You're telling me that the only way that we can have this case of zar sheshimesh b'Shabbos is a case of a non-kohen that shechs the, or a non-kohen gadol that shechs the carbon of the kohen gadol. But says Rav Ashi, I don't understand. It never said in the Brisa that we're dealing with a chatos or lavi katani, or we're. Did it say that it's talking about a lav in the Brisa? Elisura ba'alma kachashiv. The Brisa is simply listing Isurim, and therefore we could say is any avoida in which a non-kohen is not allowed to do is going to be included, whether it's going to be a karis, whether it's going to be a chatos, whether it's going to be a lav. They're all going to be included because nowhere in the Brisa did it say that we're holding in specifically on lavim and chatois. L'may nafkamino, so says the Gemara, but wait, if what you're saying is true, then who cares? You're over 2 times. If it's to teach me that it was a potential karis which will result in a chatos, it makes sense why we need to know there's 2 isurim for 2 karbanos. But if you're telling me that it's not for that, it's just any lav, why do I care that you're over 2 times? Says the Gemara, l'kavra ben Hashem gemurim. You're right. It just teaches me this din because you have to know: is this person labeled a rasha? Where does he get buried? Is he buried with regular Yisraelim, or is he a rasha? He was over 2 isurim. He has to be buried with rishayim. Murim. And that's the end of this extensive sugya. Of course, it's much deeper than we made it out to be. Machlaikisim with regard to Isser, Chalal Isser, Ein Isser, Chalal Isser, do we might be Isser Koilo, we might be Isser Maisif. Now let's begin a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Shtaim Shekichu Shtei Nashim, 2 people married 2 sisters, Ubishas Knisasim L'Chaba. We have a listen what happens over here. It's a biblical story almost. Hechlafu as Shalzel Azeh. The 2 wives get mixed up at the time that they go to the chuppah. And then what happens? Reuben thinks he's marrying Rachel, he marries Leah. Shimon thinks he's marrying Leah, he marries Rachel. Each one is chayav. Reuben and Shimon are chayav that they slept with the wrong woman. And he says, it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah, it wasn't Leah, it was Rachel. And let's say Reuben and Shimon are brothers, it's your brother's wife. If the wives are sisters, it's your wife's sister. Easter. So there's 4 potentially Isurim that could happen when the wives get mixed up. So what do? Says the Mishnah. You have to separate each one from their wife for 3 months. Maybe from that first act of intercourse they became pregnant, therefore you have to make sure that they're not before they go back to the original husband. But if they're minors and they can't give birth, then they go back right away. They're going to be puzzled from eating the truma. Let's just see this case over here to make it a little bit clearer. It's pretty simple, but Reuven and Shimon, Reuven really marries Rachel and Shimon really marries Leah, but then at the time of the Nisuin, and that's the Lashon of Bishas Knisas and L'chuppah, that's the Nisuin, that's the consummation of the marriage. They each one married the wrong wife. Shimon marries Rachel and Reuven marries Leah. And therefore, there is a big problem over here. It says that the Gemara, actually in this picture, it's pointing out the Shakavatari of the Gemara that we're about to see. The Gemara asks, Hechlifu, you're telling me that they purposely exchanged their wives? First of all, Midi Rishaya Skinan, are we dealing with Rishayim? Second of all, are we dealing with, the Rav Chia taught us the 16 potential Chatayis. But if they did it b'mezid on purpose, there's no carbon Chatas. And third of all, the Mishnah says that Machzir Naisai, that we figure out a way, whether we have to wait 3 months or whether right away, we bring them back to their wives. How could that be if they are Rishayim? So 3 issues with the Lashon of Echlifu, and it says the Gemara, let's read that inside. Echlifu, is it that they purposely exchanged their wives? Reuven purposely married Shimon's wife. I shouldn't say marries, he married his wife, consummates the marriage with Shimon's wife, and Shimon does with Reuven's wife. Midi Bereshaya, Askina number 1, are they Rishayim? Number 2, V'su Adani Rav Chia Rika and Shisha Zvi Chatois. Rav Chia taught us there is 16 potential Chatois. How do we have 16? The Mishnah listed 4 cases, 4 for him, 4 for her, and we double it as the 16. Even Mezin, Mika carbon, there's no carbon. Rav Yehuda Dani Hochlafu, says Rav Yehuda, no, change the words of the Mishnah, not Echlifu. Now they did it purposely. Hochlafu, they were exchanged. Hachinam Mistav, the Gemara brings a right to this. The Ketani Seif at the end of the Mishnah says, Imaya Ketana, Shin Riyas Leilin, Machzino Samiyad, we go back right away. Even Mezin, if they purposely marry the one, you slept with the wrong woman. Me, Sharia, are you allowed to go back to that woman? Says Gemara, one second, hello kasha, that's not a kasha. Pita ketana minus dinu. If it's a ketana, then as a din of an minus, then you could go back. Funny, you saw mishashari. And if you're ma'anis a woman, you are allowed to go back. Ella diktani, you know what the raya is in the other part of the Mishnah. We wait 3 months, which clearly implies when they're not pregnant after 3 months, what do? Sharia, and they go back to their original wife. Vibe mezin mi sharia, ella lav shmamina. So it concludes a raya, that's a raya that the Lashon of the Mishnah we have to change. That it's not the Lashon that we have, the Hechlifu, which means they purposely switched their wives. Rather it's Hochlafu, someone else switched them. And that is the raya, and we'll pick it up for the next Amud, the next year, B'siyata Dishmaya.